7 witches are wearing 7 Swatch watches. Which witch is wearing which Swatch watch? Now, as tough as that tongue twister is to say, it's actually even tougher to pick between the 2 fastest growing cities in the United States today. We probably can't help you with the tongue twister, but we definitely will help with picking the right city. So let's get started. Welcome back, friends. Today we are joined by Keith Morton, a dear friend of mine. And the reason I asked him to join me...
I'm basically from Austin. I lived in Austin on and off for about 35 years. Yeah,
okay.
So, but lived there for a long time.
And you also lived in Seattle for a long
Lived in
time,
Seattle now for on and off 15 years. I first moved to Austin in 1979 to start college at the University of Texas in Austin.
Okay.
And as everyone who goes to Austin does after you finish with college, then you normally stay there because it's such a cool city.
Right.
I moved away a few times for a variety of reasons, to study in Europe for a while, to also live in a few different cities, but Austin was like a magnet. It always drew me back. And then when I decided to come to Seattle, well, then Seattle did the same thing for me. They always just wanted me to keep coming back.
We were in Austin in October of 2019.
Yes.
We were there for a week. I absolutely loved it. I mean,
it's a great city.
Loved it so much that I actually think about moving there. Right.
As many people will do when they
right,
go visit
yeah.
it. Yes.
And for the 3rd time in a row, it's the best city to live in the United States today.
If it's not the top, it's always one of the top. I mean,
Right.
it has been that way for a long time. I think Austin has become rather popular, more so in the past 20 years.
Okay.
Before that, Austin was always sort of considered the hippie, liberal area of Texas. Back in the 70s and 80s, population was around 350,000 people. And then in sort of the mid-90s, there was an explosion in Austin due, to, I think, primarily to the music scene. People would go there for South by Southwest or for Austin City Limits. Right. And so that sort of changed the whole atmosphere of Austin. And Austin has always been known as the liberal city in Texas. I mean, and that sort of has, in the past few years, cities like Houston and Dallas and San Antonio, Galveston, El Paso have also turned Democratic, but the state is so huge, so when people think of it as a red state, it's because it's always voted since Carter, I believe. That mental image that a lot of people have of Texas from the movies, the western kind of flat land and all of that, that's
Austin's
really...
actually far from it.
Yeah, the flat, sort of arid Texas, that's West Texas. North Austin was always considered a little more upscale in some respects, whereas South Austin always had the sort of liberal, hippie sort of attitude. University of Texas is located in the north part of Austin, and then and when you go across the bridges, then you're in South Austin. It's not quite the same city it used to be, those of us who remember it from the 80s.
Right.
It's slightly changed, but I mean, it's still going to have that flavor because Austin has the University of Texas, which has over 60,000 students. It's huge.
Right.
And so you'll always have that young vibe within the city. And it's also the capital, so you'll also have a lot of political people there. And I once was on South Congress, and I was standing right next to Ann Richards, which was a big thrill for me.
Oh, wow. Okay,
yeah,
cool,
so,
cool.
yeah.
I mean, having grown up in Seattle and our proximity to Portland, I always heard the motto, keep Portland weird.
Yeah, but we had it first.
I had no idea.
Yeah, they stole that from us. I think they happened around the same time, but we had it first.
In case some people are wondering what we mean by weird, I do want to give that one example of that homeless guy who ran for mayor. Leslie?
Yeah, Leslie, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so you do know.
Of course, everybody knew Leslie died a few years ago, but everybody knows of Leslie, yeah. I believe he was a Vietnam vet who was homeless, and he was a transvestite.
Oh, okay.
He was in his probably late 50s, early 60s, something.
And he ran for mayor, right?
He was just always running for everything. He was at the city council and mayor, and he was hugely popular. Everybody loved Leslie. And he would stand on the corner on Congress Avenue in the summertime, especially in a bikini, 6-inch stiletto heels.
Okay, but what really blew me away was that he actually got 11% of the vote.
Yeah, that I wasn't aware. I knew he got something. Yeah, no, we're very proud of that.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about why Austin is the #1 city to live in the States. Traffic, cost of living, weather, job opportunities, people in terms of behavior and population, of course, and overall quality of life, So if we have to say something about the traffic, so
Well, I mean, the traffic is not great in Austin anymore. Very similar to Seattle, is that I-5 cuts through the center of the city here in Seattle. Well, so the traffic on the highway at the 5 o'clock traffic is horrendous. It's terrible in both cities. I mean, Seattle and Austin.
Here
Now, because of the coronavirus, not so much so, but when before that and hopefully after that, when this finally is over, you'll see that normal circumstances, it's dreadful. But the traffic is really bad on the freeways. Now, as all of us who lived in both cities know, you try to find alternative ways to get places. The main huge difference traffic-wise between Seattle and Austin is that Seattle has a much, much, much better public transportation system. The transportation system in Austin is getting slightly better, but it's still not great.
Right,
whereas in Seattle, you can get anywhere you want on a bus. So if you didn't want to have a car, you could always survive in Seattle without a car. In Austin, it's like California, Texas, and California are both car states. So you really need a car.
So according to CBS News, Seattle ranks number 5, being the 5th worst, and Austin comes in at 10th.
Right.
Well, how would you rank it?
That's a difficult question, but I do think that maybe Seattle's slightly worse in terms of traffic. But the difference is in Austin, again, you know, like let's say, for example, if you're commuting someplace in Seattle from one of the suburbs and you wanted to come into town, and if you're on the bus, you just take a book and you read or you listen to a podcast or something like that. And so it doesn't feel quite so bad in that respect, but it is. And whereas in Austin, you're always constantly in traffic and driving, so you don't have that option. And also because of the heat, it's so much hotter there than it is here.
If we had to name a winner for this category,
maybe Austin is slightly better than Seattle in terms of traffic. Yeah,
we'll
I'd give
1 point to Austin.
1 point to Austin.
The article also said that the Seattle traffic is so bad that it actually is around 5 hours during rush hour. And overall, at the end of the year, it'll cost you roughly $1,541 more in gas. Right.
Well, also, we have a gas tax here. So gasoline is more expensive here than it is in Texas. Also, if you get caught in downtown Seattle traffic, you know, like at 5 o'clock, especially on a Friday, forget it. It's impossible. Where it's not so bad in Austin, you can get around it.
All right. So let's get to, this is going to be fun. Weather. Right?
Yeah. Okay, but there's a huge difference in the weather.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
But still, this shouldn't come as a shock to anybody. That's Austin definitely gets more sun than Seattle.
Well, what will come as a shock to a lot of people is that it rains more, and the downfall of rain is the amount of rain is much greater in Austin than it is here.
Because here it drizzles.
It just drizzles and mists, sort of, whereas in Texas, you'll get thunderstorms. When it rains, it pours. June, July, August, and September, it's going to be 100 plus, or for those of you in Europe, 40 plus. And then May is going to be in the 90s, and October will also be in the 90s. Then in November, it'll start getting around 30, maybe 29. And then you have the winter period in Austin, which is basically January and February. And then it can get extremely cold, but it doesn't last very long. Usually around 6 weeks, and then winter's over.
If we had to name a winner for the category of weather, what would it be?
Well, that would depend on what you like. I mean, a lot of people really like heat in the summer, and if you like that type of atmosphere and weather, then Austin is the hands-down winner. If you don't like that kind of intense heat all the time, then Seattle's the winner. Because I know for me personally, and now that I've lived here for so long, when I go back to visit Austin, I can't stand it in the summer. It's way too hot for me. I've become acclimated to the Pacific Northwest. And it was actually one of the reasons I left Austin. I just felt I was just constantly boiling. But I've also been to Turkey in the summer. So if you live in Turkey and in the summertime, especially I was in Izmir for almost a month, and it was 40 all the time. But some people love that. I mean, some people would much rather have that than the temperature here. So it depends on what you personally like weather-wise. So it's hard. I can't really say there's a winner in that respect. I think that Seattle, in terms of weather, we have a bit more of a seasonal type of thing. Whereas Texas, it's either winter or summer, with a tiny little amount of fall and a tiny little amount of spring.
I mean, I want to lean more towards the sun and heat, but I looked it up, and today it's 108 degrees.
Yeah, and then you have to add a heat index on top of that. So in other words, because there will be some humidity, it's not a very dry
Right.
climate. So when you add on the humidity index, you're
feels
looking
like
at like
120.
112, 115. Yeah, so.
I mean, there's probably no other place like Seattle in the summer.
Yeah, no, Seattle's the best. If you come to
It really
Seattle,
is, yeah.
if you're thinking in your mind, maybe I want to move to Seattle, don't come here in the summer because you'll think, okay, I've got to move here tomorrow.
Yeah.
Come here in November or December, January, then you'll have a better idea.
Right.
When I was in Istanbul, I really felt the heat there because it was also so humid. And it was also very crowded. A lot of people in Istanbul.
Let's move on to job opportunities. Now, both cities are basically thriving on that.
Yeah.
Especially Seattle, right? I actually made a list of all the companies that are based in Seattle and Austin.
I mean, I think both cities are becoming rather tech. You know, there's a lot of tech influence in Austin now and also in Seattle. I think there are job opportunities in Austin that are not here and vice versa. Again, when you compare two cities that are so similar in so many respects, it's very difficult to differentiate between winner and loser sometimes. Because it would depend on the type of job you're seeking. It would depend on your educational background, what type of work you want, that sort of thing.
Just for those that are wondering, like what businesses are in Seattle and Austin. Seattle, well, the list is a little bit longer, but it starts with Boeing. Haven't employed 80,000 people. Amazon, 50,000 people. Microsoft, 45,000. There's University of Washington comes in at 25,000 people. There's Starbucks, Facebook and Google. Their headquarters aren't here, but they have large campuses throughout the city. There's Tableau, if you're not aware of them, tech company.
I think Expedia is also here.
Expedia is also here. I forgot that one. I forgot to put that in. Thank you. Yeah, Expedia is here. Adobe, Alaska Air, Nordstrom. So these are some of the top employers in Seattle and in Austin. Whole Foods came up at 14,000 employees.
Yeah, Whole Foods was actually originated in Austin. It's a very tiny little store.
Yeah, I did not know that. Keller Williams Real Estate comes in at 8,000 employees. Sonic Healthcare. I've never heard of them before.
No, I've never heard of them either.
They're one of the largest employers with 12,000 people.
Okay.
Right. Dell Technologies, of course.
Well, I would also think the University of Texas would also have quite a few because it's bigger than the University of Washington.
I also put that here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's actually way bigger.
Yeah.
I couldn't find the number of employees, but it's definitely bigger, as you say. So University of Texas is right there as well. H-E-B grocery chain?
Yeah, that's here it's called Safeway, and it's H-E-B. It used to be Safeway in Austin, then it became I think it's Henry E. Butts is the name for H-E-B. But there is no Safeway in Austin, but it's similar.
And Walmart.
Yeah, that's not a very pleasant thought.
Well, it's not, but it still comes
those of us who don't like Walmart.
Yeah. So for jobs, for job opportunities, like you said, I mean, it can swing either way, right?
Yeah, there are a lot more restaurants and things like that, and bars and clubs in Austin. So people doing that sort of work, waiters, waitresses, etc., they'll have more opportunity in Austin than they would here. The pay scale would not be quite as high in Austin as it is here, but the cost of living is dramatically less there too.
What you can buy there for $250,000?
You can't even touch here.
You can't even touch it. You'd probably get a studio apartment.
If that. And it wouldn't be near it wouldn't be in the city either. It would be out of the city. Yeah. People in Austin will still complain about how expensive it is, and when I tell them the comparison between Austin and Seattle, there is no comparison.
In their own perspective, it probably has.
It's much more expensive than it used to be in Austin, but and it's going up for sure. But it certainly isn't. It can't touch Seattle in terms of that. Seattle's so much more expensive.
Yeah, we can't talk about Seattle and Austin and not mention the food scene. Right.
A lot of Mexican influence from Mexican food because Mexico is not that far away. But also a lot of fusion food now with a lot of different tastes from other areas. I mean, I think what people tend to forget about Austin, especially people here in Seattle, is that population-wise, the city itself is much larger than Seattle. I think Seattle has 800,000, 900,000 people, and Austin has, I think, the city itself, 1.25 million, something like that. So you're going to have a little bit of more diversity in some respects in a city like that that's bigger. So the food, of course, you're going to have a huge variety. But a lot of it's based on some sort of Latin influence.
So,
No, in that respect, Austin definitely wins hands down in the sense of cost of living, rent, food, gasoline, that kind of stuff. Austin will win over Seattle for sure.
Because the only thing that I noticed is significantly higher in Austin than it is here is the property tax.
Yeah, I've never owned anything in Austin. I was always a renter, so that I never could. I wouldn't really know property taxes.
It's quite high.
But I can imagine it is expensive. You have to add that in.
You have to add that in. But when you consider that everything else is way cheaper, it kind of makes up for it.
Well, I think that, you know, like when I tell my friends in Austin that I live, and I don't live in the center of Seattle. I mean, you know, I live at 95th off of Aurora, and I have a studio, a micro studio apartment, 225 square feet, and it's $1,050 a month. And that was a steal. That was a good deal. I mean, that was the best I could find.
Repeating that one more time.
225 square feet, which I don't know in cubic.
I believe it's right around 20 square meters.
Perhaps, if that. If that. Yeah, and that was
how much?
$1,050 a month plus all utilities.
Plus all utilities.
Yeah.
Nothing is included.
Nothing is included.
Not to mention you don't have a washer dryer in the unit.
No.
Where are you going to put it?
Yeah, there would be no place to put it. My entire apartment is less than your living room area. My entire apartment. But the sad part is that $1,050 is considered really, really cheap in Seattle.
What would you get for around $1,000 to $1,200 in Austin?
You'd get at least a one-bedroom apartment. At least, yeah, and maybe even a two-bedroom apartment.
At least one. That point definitely goes to Austin.
Right.
So let's get to the one thing that I personally think is one of the most important aspects is the people. Because here in Seattle, we have this thing called the Seattle freeze. Right. I mean, you know.
Which is very true, and it's a very difficult aspect of living in Seattle when you first move here. You really start to feel isolated, and then if you would move here in the wintertime, you already feel isolated enough because it's depressing and cloudy, and you stay in your apartment and read all the time. So yeah, that's a real aspect of living in Seattle. Once I've developed friends, then all of a sudden you're open up to another group of friends and another group, and then you have your group of friends.
Right.
But there's still that sort of attitude here in Seattle where, you know, let's get together, but no time soon.
Right.
You know?
Or no time ever.
Or no time ever. Or, you know, I'll call you in a couple of weeks or something like that. Yeah. Whereas in Texas, we're much friendlier people. I mean, sometimes people accuse that of being a rather surface. But it is nice when you move into to a neighborhood and then you talk to your neighbors and, oh, so you're new, well, welcome to the neighborhood, or that sort of thing. If you go into a restaurant, people are very friendly. And so the friendliness of Austin definitely beats the friendliness of Seattle, hands down.
Someone who is as social as I am, and I like to talk to people, get to know them, make them friends, right? The fact that you say something and you don't mean it, that's, you know, like I was saying earlier, it's a deal breaker. Right? And the fact that I've lived here for 29, 30 years, it's a mystery, even to me.
If you meet somebody in Texas and you go, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, how are you? I mean, you start a small conversation. Or if you introduce yourself, that person will introduce themselves back to you. That's not here, no. You might say to somebody, how are you today? And they'll go, fine, and then they'll just walk away from you. They won't ask how you're doing. Or you can introduce yourself, hi, my name's Keith, and they won't say their name. And I found that really odd the first few years I lived here. I was there, and finally at the end I would start. Well, finally I would just hold a person's hand and finally just say, "And your name is."
You actually had to squeeze it out of them.
Yeah, you'd have to say because you know they were just oblivious to that.
Don't get me wrong. The people in Seattle are very polite, very kind,
nice people.
Lovely
yes,
people,
right.
Lovely people. When
just not very gregarious.
Right. In that respect, I would definitely give this point to Austin.
Oh yeah, even when I go back to visit Austin or things, the people are much more outgoing, much more friendlier group of people.
Yeah.
And if they say, let's go have coffee, they're like, okay, when are we going to do it? Tomorrow, the next day? Or, you know, they want to meet with you. Here, it's not quite the same, no.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it's so depressing here in the winter. People are so used to just being away from everybody, I don't know.
If we had to say something about the overall quality of life, both in Seattle and Austin,
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think this, like I've said before, the cities are very similar. Politically, Austin has never voted Republican ever. It's always voted Democratic. Right. We're very proud of that fact, too.
It's a blue city for
sure. It's a blue city for sure. But I think the quality of life, it depends, again, on what type of life you're seeking. If you're looking for outdoor, where you hike in the woods and you get on the ocean and you're do a lot of camping, Seattle wins. Yeah, Seattle. That's Seattle. It's a very outdoorsy place. Yeah. If you're looking to do some of the outdoors types of things, like, you know, go hiking on a trail or to go on one of the lakes, to go boating or things, then Austin is that for you too. If you're looking for like nightlife, I think Austin wins in that respect. Or this whole area in this downtown area, that's, you know, a lot of the 6th Street, but also 4th Street, and a lot of bars and things like that are there. Where you can drive 2 hours and you're out someplace and you feel like you're in a little small town. You have that in both cities. Yeah. So you're not that far away. The plus about Seattle would be if you wanted to go to an island, within 30 minutes you can take a ferry and you're on a different island and you're in a different world. Whereas in Austin you have to drive, but there are some pretty charming little towns like Fredericksburg, which was a German town, which is only about 45 miles away. And then you can also go to San Antonio, which is an hour and a half away. If you wanted to go to Houston, it's 3 hours.
3 hours, right?
Yeah.
But if you had to name one city.
Oh, it's
I'm going to have to put you on the spot.
I don't know. I mean, for me personally, I prefer Seattle. I mean, that's why I live here.
So we'll give that point to Seattle then.
But I also understand that, you know, I'm at a different point in my life. You know, I'm no longer a college student, and I'm no longer thinking in those terms. If I were a college student, I think I'd prefer to live in Austin, just because of the more the friendliness, the opportunities to do things, and also just the idea that Austin is becoming such an up-and-coming city.
We also probably have to consider the fact that, like, how much money you can possibly make in the city, and how far those dollars are going to go.
Exactly.
Right.
I think if you're a younger person, you know, let's say the age of college age to maybe even up to 50, then you definitely want to think in terms of Austin, just because of the sort of the life it offers in some respects. And if you're over the age of 50 or 60, you definitely don't want to think about Seattle because it's too expensive, and especially if you're retiring, you know. So then you have to find some sort of area that's right for you, unless you're wealthy and then you can afford to live in these places. But if you're thinking of retiring, then it becomes much more difficult in a city like Seattle. So,
like I said, my vote shouldn't count. But
if you had to, yes.
But if I had to, I would definitely give that point to Austin.
Right.
I think.
I mean, if you look at this, and these are both recent pictures of the cities, you can see that there's a vibrant downtown area in both of them. You know, and so if that's what you're seeking, that sort of environment, you've got it in both cities. If you're seeking more of the outdoor mountainous areas, there are no mountains in Austin. There are some rolling hills, we call them, but there are no mountains. And so then you'd want Seattle. If you want, you know, outdoors type of things where you're sitting there drinking a margarita or a beer with your friends, you know, then you want Austin. So it depends on what you're looking for. I would say it was a tie with maybe a slight edge to Austin, only because it's a bigger city. There are different sort of things to do compared to Seattle. But Seattle would win in the sense of the scenery and like the mountains, the ocean, the islands. But if you're looking for a specific, I would say maybe a slight edge towards Austin.
I'll let the viewers be the judge of this one.
Right.
But in our perspective, it sounds like the scale is tipped towards Austin just slightly.
Ever so slightly. I mean, just almost minimally. Yeah.
Okay. So that about covers it. I want to thank you for that. But before we say bye, I did look up some fun and interesting facts on both cities.
Okay.
Right? So for Austin, I thought these were really interesting. Austin has the only nude beach in all of Texas.
In all of Texas. It's called Hippie Hollow.
Hey,
and it's on Lake. Yeah, of course, everybody knows it. And Hippie Hollow, this kind of little high range here, if you go over that, that's where Lake Travis is. And so that's where Hippie Hollow is. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And it was from the 60s, whenever all the hippie college kids would go there and take off all their clothes and smoke pot. Yeah.
And Austin happens to be one of the sunniest cities in all of U.S. The actual number is right around 300 days out of 365.
Yeah.
That's a lot of sun.
You're not going to miss the sun.
Yeah, you're not going to miss the sun anytime soon. So that I thought was cool, and also the fact that it has no professional sports team.
No.
And for Seattle, Seattle has the first radio station that airs 24/7 in the country.
Okay.
Right, and it's KEXP, I believe it's 90.3. And the city of Seattle has more dogs and cats than children.
I can imagine. I believe that, yes. I believe that, yeah.
Anyway, I thought it was interesting and fun.
Right.
So I do want to thank you.
No, thank you for inviting me. I hope I was able to give some sort of an idea between the two cities. I still feel very much so that they are so similar in so many respects. It really comes down to just a few things that separate the cities.
Yeah.
And it comes down to what you, as I said before, what you're seeking and what you enjoy. So if you enjoy the heat and being out on the lake and, you know, having a happy hour with friends at a waterfront cafe or something, then you're definitely going to want to choose Austin.
Yeah.
If you're going to want a different type of a lifestyle where in June you're wearing a jacket at night and you're hiking up in the mountains or going to the islands or doing other things, then you'll want to choose Seattle.
Because at the end of the day, they're both beautiful, great cities.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't beat them.
It all depends on what you're looking for. But
Good.
I want to thank you for that. Hope you guys find it valuable. I hope you like it. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys, and we'll see you at the next video.